sight, sound, smells, taste of my particular writer's life, and where do you get the truth? And subscribe if you haven't already. Punch the like button, all that stuff.
Yada yada. Yeah.
And I have once more the great Troy Silence of the Lambert. And we're going to be talking today about. By the way, I have this new flipper tooth.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it makes me feel like I love it, but it makes me feel like I'm slurring my words.
Oh.
Because it says it takes 30 days to get used to it.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine had that too, and it adds to that sibilance of like when you're talking. Yeah, and so when you're recording, you're like
sibilance.
No, you're not really doing that, but it feels like every time you say yes, you're saying,
it is because they add a little piece of it's part of the engineering.
Yeah.
So that it stays in your mouth. Necessitates.
Maybe that's what was up with Tyson, man. Maybe he had a flapper thing for his whole entire life. Had all his teeth knocked out. And it's like, this is wonderful.
That was perhaps the worst fucking Mike Tyson impression I have ever heard in my life. But it was great.
He'd come over and punch me right in the face.
Yeah. Well, what's his famous saying? Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
But he's got a plan to get punched in the face. That's right. Mm-hmm. Hey, speaking of punches in the face, we're going to talk about Pulp.
We're going to talk about Pulp. Troy and I are editing this brand new Pulp Fiction anthology. That convoluted and complicated start to this whole thing. Especially when I was in Italy. Anyway, and we had a publisher on board at one point, and it came down to like Troy and I were like, why don't we just do this ourselves? Because we both have our own imprints, and instead of like complicating things and giving away 50% here, 15% there, or whatever, like, Jesus, I think we can do this on our own. And which got me thinking, and it's called True Pulp, and we're gonna probably do a bunch of these.
Yeah,
it's a true series. So, like, the next one might be True Romance, or True Western, or True Action, True whatever.
Yeah,
but this one's True Pulp. And I think we have like Kristen Katherine Rusch. We have Dean Wesley Smith. We have Tom Schreck. We have Troy Lambert. We have Vincent Zandri. We have Charlie Salzberg.
Yeah,
the great Paul Brazill.
Yeah, can't forget Brazill.
I think it's actually Brazill. If you're listening, Paul.
Yeah. Sorry about that, Paul.
Yeah, and a few others, and it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to make a great stocking stuffer. When the time comes, but it should be out pretty soon. But we're going to be interviewing just about every author. If anybody wants to come on. Harvey Stambro, the great Harvey Stambro, who was like our senior person, will be I'll be interviewing him tomorrow. And the overall question that I'm going to be asking everyone on this deal is: are we in fact in a new Pulp Fiction age?
Yeah.
And I'm going to pose that to you, Troy. You knowing the history of pulp, are we in a new pulp age?
So I'm going to say yes on a couple of different fronts. First of all, because if you're not familiar with the history of pulps were those books that were on the little spinner racks at the store. They were really cheap. They were made on really cheap paper, so they weren't really made to be something that you kept and cherished. They were made to be something that you read, you threw away, they got recycled, whatever the case may be. A lot of times, if they didn't sell, they went back to the publisher, the cover got ripped off, they might get thrown to the library or something else, whatever. Or you might find them in a bargain book bin or something like that. I mean, wouldn't really matter. But then they just got recycled and made into cheap paper again. and then something else was published on them. So they're very temporary, but they were also very, what I would just call, unsanitized fiction. Like, it's very hard hitting, typically fiction, little rougher stuff than normal. The detectives were dark and gritty. The settings were dark and gritty. Even the sci-fi stuff was generally a little bit darker. And I think a couple things are happening. First of all, we have digital tools and other tools that we can make pulp, but we can make pulp that's a little more permanent. Like Vince and I were talking right before this. I think this is pulp with a legacy. This
Pulp
is
with a legacy. I love it.
Pulp with a legacy. Pulp that can stick around forever. Digital books will be around forever. These will be on the shelves forever. And we can create some really lasting, cool books for a cheaper price than we probably could at any other time in history. It's just, we have all these tools like print on demand. We can create hardcover editions and things like that we couldn't have done before. And things like Kickstarter, which we're doing this through, allow us to do that. But I also think that in an age of very sanitized fiction, where we have people being very careful about what they write and not offending anyone and things like that, I think sometimes just getting back to that grit, hard hitting, truth telling, tell it like it is, and life is tough, and so are our heroes type stories, is something that people are interested in. I think we've gone too far with the over sanitization of a lot of entertainment and fiction, when a lot of times, in previous years, fiction was designed to maybe shake people up and offend them a little bit and get them to think a little differently than what their mindset was. And I think
Right.
that falls on both sides, any side of the political spectrum here on anything, is that
Yep.
maybe sometimes you need to be shook up a little bit. And I think that's
Yeah.
what noir fiction and pulp fiction tends to do, is it tends to shake up your idea of what is good, what is bad, what is reality, and what isn't.
Right.
So
I mean, I'm always all about, like, nab this book and escape. I'm
yep,
always about the escapism.
yep,
And there's so my Chase Baker Adventure series. I want people to, read those books. Like, they can't really go anywhere because maybe they have, a mortgage and kids in school and all that sort of stuff. But maybe I can transport them for a weekend to Egypt
yeah.
or something like that, right?
Egypt or Turkey or wherever. Yeah.
Wherever I go. But also, I think, you know, Pulp did something in the 30s, for instance, for people who misery loves company, and people could relate to people that were up against it all.
Hmm.
Whether it be a detective or whatever, you're up against it all, and your next move could be your last. You know, you would have a detective who would go into the diner and, like, pull out the dime, and, like, all he could afford was maybe a cup of coffee,
Hmm.
or the typical soup of warm water and ketchup packets,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Tough times, whatever. And at the same time, someone's trying to kill him or whatever.
Yeah.
But would you? So, I mean, on a historical level, I'm thinking, like, pulp maybe began in the newspapers, like with Charles Dickens, and in the
Hmm.
1880s, 1890s.
Well, and the big theme of pulp has always been very ordinary people that we can relate to doing extraordinary things.
Right.
The other thing that pulp came out in is like the short serials that came with movies a lot of times. Like, you'd see the movie,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
in the
yeah.
middle or at the end, they'd have a short serial and beat some detective in some battle or whatever. You'd have to come back the next week to see what ended,
Oh, that's
how
right.
it
The
ended
serials.
or how it came
Right.
out.
Yeah.
And they were just these short little film type things, but it was film noir, film pulp.
Right.
And that, like, who collects those anymore? Where do you see those anymore? Well, you have to really dig for them. They're out there, but you have to
They're
really
out there
dig
on
for them.
YouTube a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, they're out there on YouTube and stuff like that a little bit, but you kind of have to dig for them. You kind of have to know what you're looking for, right? And
Right.
but though, because they weren't designed to be Oscar bait or a
No.
movie that was going to last, it was designed to be that quick little entertainment that got you to come back to the theater the next week to see what was going to happen next. right? And that's so, but it was always some guy who's just an ordinary guy, and he's in this really bad, terrible circumstance, and somehow he comes out of it anyway.
Right.
And sometimes the noir aspect of it is that sometimes he doesn't come out of it.
Right.
Sometimes he doesn't make it. And then we go, oh, well, sometimes in life things end badly,
That's
that
right.
type of thing.
Yeah.
So I think, but that theme of very ordinary people and very ordinary heroes put in extraordinary circumstances. So instead of having, some hero on a spaceship flying through space, we have a broke, down and out detective who takes a case out of pity and doesn't get paid to do it, but he's going to find out who did the bad thing because justice should prevail, and that's
Right.
something he believes in. And so those characters, they have something to believe in, something that motivates them, that's beyond money, that's beyond some kind of glory or whatever, but that is just because things are right and need to be made right, or whatever the case may be. And
Right.
so I think that's a part of the themes that are there, and that those ordinary people are people that you and I can relate to. That it's like, so we're not, looking at some soldier or some, Jack Reacher that can beat up anybody, no matter who they are, and
Right.
walks around with changes of clothes but no backpack, and things like that. I mean,
I
you
know.
know,
I know.
but I mean, you know
I
what I
know.
mean? Like, even though Reacher is kind of a pulpy type thing too, but it's just these ordinary heroes that really they got nothing, and they got nothing to lose and nothing to necessarily live for, but they find something, you know. And
Right.
I think that's something that people are looking for, is those ordinary heroes. We're not looking for Marvel as much as we're looking for, you know, whoever, Chase Baker, Max Boucher, all those type of heroes that are like, it's not some glorious guy, it's some guy who's working his butt off to do the right
Right.
thing.
Right. That doesn't mean we're not going to come out with like some sort of true, I don't know, what would you even call it? True comics, or no, that's
Mm,
probably not the right title.
well,
But the
true superheroes,
true
true
superheroes, exactly.
true action heroes, true
Right.
superheroes, things like
Right.
that.
I mean,
And yeah, I mean, it's just, and each genre has something different to offer. And there's also, like, there's a certain amount of romance in pulp. There's a certain amount of,
right.
uh, yeah, action. There's a certain amount of, I mean, all those things can be a part of the pulp universe as well. There were pulp science
Right.
fiction novels, dime sci-fi novels, quarter sci-fi novels which weren't a quarter by the time I was a kid, but I mean, they were cheap, and you'd go buy them, and it's just some space hero thing that's
Yeah.
action adventure, all kinds of stuff, and then it's over. And
I remember buying
good stuff.
Sergeant Rock for 50 cents.
Yeah, 50 cents, 75 cents. I remember those. Yeah. And comics
Those were
were
comics.
15
Yeah.
cents a quarter. 15 cents a quarter for comics.
Yeah.
Comic books. Some of those comic books are worth a freaking fortune now. That, hey, how the heck did we know? But you know what I
Yeah.
mean. But
Yeah.
it's all in that same genre of, like, we've got some things that are just, a lot of genre fiction is just what I call disposable fiction. I expect people to read the book, enjoy it, have a good time with it, maybe learn a thing or two, and then move on with your life. And I don't expect people to read my books more than once normally. I mean, you might,
Right.
some of them you might, but I mean,
Right.
it's not really, you've heard the story, it's over, man, move on,
Right.
And
Right.
so we're not trying to write some classic or whatever where people are going to dissect it in English class. We
Right.
just want you to have
Plus,
a good time and escape,
plus
you know?
being Troy Lambert, you're going to have a new story the next week anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be next week anyway. In fact, I was just, when you were saying that earlier about your short story and what you've done with it, I'm like, man, I got a couple short stories I just put out there, man. I just I might as well be earning money on them by the weekend instead
Yeah.
of
I was
messing
just
around.
telling. I mean, this is kind of what we're getting at. Like legacy pulp. Like, what are you calling this? The
Pulp
legacy
with
of
a
pulp.
legacy. Pulp with a
Pulp with a
legacy.
legacy. I got to
Yeah,
write this down.
yeah,
It, I was telling Troy in the green room that I've committed to writing a short story per week, regardless of the novels I'm working on, stuff like that. And so I wrote the first one called Memory Bank, and I got the cover made. I wrote the story in about 3 hours. It's 8 chapters. I like to do short stories and chapters.
yeah.
That's just the way
I like
I work.
chapters. Yeah, yeah,
And the cover came in. Everything's done. At 4:30, I'm like, I got like 15 minutes. Boom. I published it on
yeah,
KDP.
yeah.
And when it comes through tomorrow after it's approved, I'll look it over if all's well. it'll also be available in paper. And then rinse and repeat, you know. But the beauty of this is, and I guess this is what I was getting at earlier, there was the original Pulp Fiction that came in the form of newspapers where like guys like Charles Dickens would get paid like a penny a word or something like that.
Yep.
Which is why some of his prose is so overblown. You know,
Yeah.
they're coming up with a lot of with a lot of words.
There's a lot of extra description in there.
A lot of extra descriptions.
Description in there.
You know, oh yes, it's a lovely goose, sir. It's got, you know, gray and black feathers, sir, and it's, you know, anyway. And then you have like the post World War I era where the magazines started coming out, and the Depression era where that was especially huge for Pulp Fiction because you could hardly put food on the table, but a lot of women. That's when a lot of women really started reading the escapism, and you know they'd set aside their nickel per week. They would find a nickel so that they could at least have that type of enjoyment, you know, where the rest went to the family for food and stuff like that. And then World War II came around, and a lot of the magazines started disappearing a little bit in favor of all those little dime novels that they would include with the GIs with their mess kits, or not the mess kits, but with their food rations or whatever.
Yeah.
And
food rations.
Rations, And so, and then came the, you know, film and all that sort of stuff in the 50s and whatever. But then something changed in the late 60s, early 70s, and like the dime novel started disappearing, and then came like that. Two pulp eras had come and gone, and now you were into this legacy, what we call now the legacy publishing industry, where you needed an agent, you needed a publisher, and your book was going to come out in hardcover, hopefully, and then mass market paperback, and they wanted that mass market paperback to be thick. And so pulp kind of went away, even though there was hard-boiled mystery and all that sort of stuff, but the whole idea of
the whole idea of short disposable fiction
that was mass produced
kind of went by the wayside. That was mass produced because publishers felt like they weren't making a high enough profit margin on it, really. And they wanted, and then authors got to the point of some of these authors that, well, I want a big advance. Well, I can't give you a big advance on a pulp novel. You know,
that's going to be on the rack for
you're not
going
to get that kind of
maybe
thing.
two.
You know, it's going to be on the rack for a week or two, and then it's going to go away. Right. But the thing is, there were a bunch of guys like you said, in those previous areas that made their living doing that type of thing. And hey, that's how they survived as writers. But in the 70s, and this is why a lot of us that were like growing up in that period, when we said, hey, I want to be a writer when I grow up, people said that's impossible because the odds were so long that you actually even get picked up. And that if you did get picked up, that you actually made money. That like it was just an era where being a professional author was a dream that was really hard to achieve. You know, and the people that did it were few and far between because they didn't have the opportunities that we've had since you and I have kind of come into this industry where things have radically changed, and we don't necessarily have to rely on that legacy type publishing stuff anymore.
In fact,
you know,
we don't have to at all. I mean, you know, when I was first into it, I had to, you know, 25 years ago, like that was it. You went to writing school, you dropped 40 grand there. You had to get an agent, and, you know, hopefully you got the right agent, and hopefully he or she sold your book and made you a decent advance. But then comes the trouble, because if you don't earn out your advance, nobody wants you anymore. So career done.
Career over before it really started, you know, because really the problem was of that era too was you get a 6-figure advance and you say, now I've made it as an author. I've got it, man. I buy the house, buy the car, all that kind of stuff because shit, I'm there. I mean, we've talked about your story before, and you're like, I've made it. I'm there. I'm good. I'm rolling. And then you go, well, oh crap, actually, I'm not
No,
rolling because now I didn't earn out that advance. I don't got that. They're not even
I
publishing
quit
the
my
next book. What
job.
am I going to do
Yeah,
now? Yeah, you have to go back to a job,
everybody
that
thinks you're
type
a
of
loser.
thing. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean, yeah, including your
yeah. Oh,
family, all the
shit,
people
yeah.
that said, I told you you
Mm,
couldn't make it. Told you couldn't make it. And so now we live in an era where you can actually physically make
yep,
that happen.
yep. And
So, yeah.
the prolific are the blessed. If you're not prolific,
Yeah.
if you just have trouble putting words down on paper, and it's going to take you 3 years to write a book, um, do something else as well. Nothing wrong with that. But do something else as
Yeah.
well. But it leads me to, like, I think we're now officially in the third era of pulp, which
Yeah.
is the pulp with a legacy, because we can write our stories now as fast as we want. We can write whatever we want. We can create as many series as we want. Um, we can do whatever we want there, as fast as we want. As long as it's
Hmm.
good. It's got to be good, right? Of course. And we have
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you have to be able to write a good
right,
story. You have to be able to write a
right,
good story. I mean, that's craft is the
right,
foundation of everything. People will tell me, "Oh, I don't need this or I don't need that." I'm like, "What you need is to be able to write a really good story that
right.
people want to read." That's really what you all the that's the foundation of what you need. Now, on top of that, you need marketing. You need all kinds of
Yeah,
other stuff as well. But it's like the thing is you get in this age now where you can reach readers enough directly enough that you can get people that are fans of you. So no matter
that's right.
what you go off on some crazy tangent and write, they'll read it because they're your
Right.
fans. They're not necessarily fans of a certain genre, a certain thing. And that's another hazard of advertising that we can talk about at some point when you work on advertising something that I mean, if it's not your normal thing and you really struggle. And I'm like, that's because you don't have fans of you. You have fans of a genre or fans of a certain
Very
thing or
true.
whatever. And that's the beauty of what we're in right now is you can write anything you want. You can write it as fast as you want, as long as you want, as short as you want. You can release it in audio really quickly,
Yep.
really easily. There's all kinds of things that you can do. Like you were talking about, you can release it in print, even if it's a
Sure.
short story. And hey, if nobody buys it in print, kind of who cares? It's still available. It's
Yep.
still out there. It's
Yep.
still available. That type of thing. So we've got all these options that just weren't around before. And I think it really is a golden age in a lot of ways. I mean, are there struggles?
Yeah.
Sure,
Always. There's always
absolutely.
gonna be.
But there always
Right.
have been. I mean, it's never
Yep.
been easy.
Yep. I mean,
So, you know,
but I think this pulp with a legacy thesis means is, whereas in the past these books would be thrown out after a certain amount of time, they are
hmm,
not anymore. Now they're there forever, in in
yeah,
at least electronic form or whatever. But no one's going to throw them out.
hmm,
So, like, our
yeah,
grandchildren's friends can be like, "Oh, old man Zandri's books, old man Lambert's books. He's long gone, but, like, holy crap, these are
yeah,
pretty good." That'll happen.
yeah.
You know,
Exactly. Exactly. That like, well, think of, Philip K. Dick, the most I was telling a friend of mine about it because I got a piece of art on
yes,
my wall
love Philip.
that has one of the Philip K. Dick things on it. He's one of the most film adapted sci-fi authors
Right.
ever. He had more films adapted from his work than anybody else. He
Posthumously,
died in
sadly.
what?
you know, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because he died in
yes,
78 and his first movie, Blade Runner, came out in
right,
82.
yep,
So, but I mean, think about the fact that of how that happened then, and then compare that to now when all of our stuff lives digitally forever. Like his stuff was still in that old traditional format, being
yep,
printed, being passed around, but somebody found it and found it worthwhile of making it into a movie or whatever the
right,
case may be. And, so in his case, even though it happened after he died, he's still got this
yep,
legacy that's
yep,
pretty incredible. And that can happen to any
yes.
one of us because, and I mean, hopefully it happens
Right.
when we're
Well,
alive
what
so
did
we
what
can
did
enjoy it.
Hemingway
But,
say? Like,
you
when it
know,
happens after you die, you can't be bothered with it anymore. So,
yeah, you can't be bothered with anymore. Well, yeah, and then you don't worry about who's playing you in the movie
yeah, you
because
can't be bothered with it. Who cares? Yeah,
who cares? And it doesn't
yep,
really matter, you know. But yeah, absolutely. But that's pulp with a legacy. All it means is that our stuff lives longer than it
yes.
used to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it still has to be discovered. Things still have to happen for it to become, to go beyond what it is now into
Right,
being
right.
something else.
I
But
remember
yeah.
Philip K. Dick, an interview with him saying, it was an interview shortly before his death, and he said he had, number one, never met his agent ever, and number two, like his largest advance was like $5,000. Like that was it.
Hmm.
I don't know how many books he sold. I never really discovered him until 1982 when Blade Runner came out, and it was based on his
Yeah.
book. To Electric Sheep Dream or whatever it's called. But and I've
Yeah. Do androids dream of
that's it,
electric sheep?
and I've read it.
Yeah.
I've read it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understood it at the time, but because the movie was way more straightforward. But but I read all his books afterwards, though, and I certainly what a
Yeah.
writer. But amazing. I mean, talk about
Well,
struggling.
yeah.
I mean, here's a guy who definitely struggled financially. There's no question about it. And
Yeah.
he becomes like this powerhouse when after he dies,
Yeah.
ahead of his time. You know,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, ahead of his time a little bit. I mean, and also, I mean, if you think about it, like making that type
right,
of movie, like what really paved the way for that was Star Trek: The Motion Picture, Star Wars, that we actually started to see epic sci-fi put on the
right,
big screen. Before then, it always been kind of this niche, small screen television thing, type thing. So there was nobody really producing what Philip K. Dick
right,
wrote as far as his movies. I mean, think about even the Foundation series in Asimov. I mean, it was written in 1942, came out as a series on Apple TV, what, 2 years
oh, is that
ago,
true?
3 years ago? Yeah. So, I mean, think about Hugh Howey. It's interesting. Hugh Howey, like, he was part of the indie movement when it
Yeah,
first started
yeah,
out and stuff like that, and Wool and Silo and all that kind of stuff. And I remember a friend of mine and I celebrating with him when Ridley Scott picked up that screenplay for
right.
Silo 15 years
Wow.
ago, and it just got made on Apple TV
Oh
two
my
years
God,
ago. Started being made 2 years ago. That's what overnight
that's right.
success looks like for
Yeah,
writers like us. It's 10 years of hard work and labor, and then lightning
right,
strikes, right? Or like they finally make the movie that, I mean, they bought the rights a
right.
long time ago, but nobody was making it, so finally they made it.
Yeah,
So you
yeah,
know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, that's just the way things
yeah. Hollywood moves
happen.
slow.
It's just, yeah, yeah, everything moves slow, but we have opportunities now. I mean, I think there's going to be an age of some new pulp shorts and filmmaking, because we've got options with AI and
Yep.
independent filmmakers and stuff like that are making some short
Yes.
films, and that are going to probably come out of pulp, and it's going to be easy, disposable
Yep.
films like that. You watch it, you
Yep.
love it. Nobody reads it. Nobody
My
watches it
my
again.
my
You
agent
know.
retired, so I interviewed a new agent last night, and and she was telling me, she's like, and I was explaining about the shorts and all that sort of stuff, and she's like, listen, dude, I know a ton of producers and directors that are like going for shorts, instead of the big books and stuff.
Hmm.
She's like, there's so many opportunities right now, and I
Hmm.
was like, you're kidding? I didn't even know that. And she's like, yeah, no, 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 I'm interested in all that sort of type of thing. So like, I guess that is the way things are going. I mean, there are so many opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are agents out there who are really, what they're interested in is our media rights and turning things into short films and turning
Yeah,
things into film and stuff like that. Like, they don't even care about our ebooks and physical books. They know that we kind of have that
right,
dialed in. But they're looking at that media thing because they know, hey, we can self-publish that. We can put it out under our own imprints and we can make a bunch of money on it. But what we can't do is go out and just have a film
right,
made. You
right.
know what I mean? Like, just go, okay, I'm gonna go out and produce
But
that for
boy, is
my own
that
book.
coming.
No, I don't have that. But first of all, first of all, it's coming. Second of all, there are producers and indie filmmakers and stuff like that who are making stuff like even just for YouTube. But hey, it goes viral on YouTube. You and the movie producer
Yeah,
make bank. Like, we're not reliant on, we've got Netflix and Paramount and 60 million
right,
other streaming services out there, and all of them hungry for content. and people are into that short video, that short thing, that short audio, the short audio stuff I'm doing with the Solitaire series. Like, you get more listens
Yeah.
every week on Spotify and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And the reason is people are into that now. They're like, I'm interested in that short audio. I'm interested in what that's all about, because they can listen to it on their commute to work and then they're done. One complete story
Yeah.
on your way to work.
Explain a little
Fantastic.
bit more about
You
that.
know.
How
So,
you're doing that.
so the Solitaire series. So what basically happened is Spotify. So there's a bunch of changes that are happening to audio, and one of them, I mean, I know this is not really our topic today, but Spotify is even so they bought Findaway Voices, uh, 18 months ago, 2 years ago now, something like that. Had a big kerfuffle over rights. That kind of settled down. They kind of finally figured out they weren't going to do a rights grab of authors, because authors were going to get mad and go away. And so they changed their terms and stuff like that. Now they're changing it where it's going from Findaway Voices to Spotify for authors. But what they're looking at right now is they're doing a lot of short audio. You're seeing a lot of authors are doing short audio, which is just short stories, series of short stories, whatever, chapter stories, things like that, on audio, short, so that people can listen to them on their commute, whatever, and they get a whole story instead of having to listen to a book in pieces over their audio commute. The advantage that they have over that is people are buying that or getting it with a Spotify premium subscription over going to Audible, where because it's a credit system, people look at how long the book is and they want a really long audiobook. Well, the problem is writers are not writing really long books that make really long
Right.
audiobooks anymore. So shorts don't sell on Audible because of the format and how the credits work. But they do sell. They just sell on Apple and iTunes and Spotify and these other places that are allowing for short audio and saying, hey, you can just base the price of the book based on
Right.
how long it is. Right. We don't have to need this tome that's 16 hours of audio, because that's what, listeners on Audible are looking for, because they want as much Audible as they can get for that one little
Right.
credit they got each month or whatever.
Right.
you know so yeah, it's adopting kind of the subscription service, the Kindle Vella, the Patreon, the Ream, the Wattpad. It's just the audio version of
Right.
that. Short audio, just like people are looking for short fiction. And so it's actually, that agent's exactly right, is that people are hungry for those shorts because it's quick, easy. They can watch something in 20 minutes, boom, they're done, move on to the
Exactly.
next thing. And so there's a new market for that. That's just people are hungry for those bite-sized things. And so it's kind of fun to be a part of. It's kind of interesting to watch how it's evolving over time. Start of the year a little slow, and now it's just picking up every week. Just
It's a
more and
new
more
income
people
stream.
listening every week. Yeah, it's new income stream, and it's not hurting
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think it's fantastic. See, this is how I learn when I have Troy on. This is how I learn about stuff, because I live in my own little bubble, and I am always like a couple years behind Troy, always, perpetually. I've described Troy before as like in grammar school, like sixth or seventh grade. You'd walk in the morning, you got your little lunchbox, your little GI Joe lunchbox or whatever, and Troy'd be like, "Did you study for the social studies test today?" And he'd be like, I didn't know we had one today, Troy."
yeah, that wasn't really me in school, though. I wasn't always on top of it like that. I was off writing a book or reading a book. I wasn't really
Right,
paying attention
right.
to the
Yeah.
school thing.
My son,
So
actually, my son is really into
yeah.
anime, and he and his brother do anime, and he'd be like, "Oh yeah, when I was in school, I flipped the anime book inside the textbook and pretend like I was paying attention to
Mhm.
class."
I did that with
Yeah,
paperbacks all the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yep.
I was like, "Wow,
Yeah.
really?"
How I got through high school chemistry. That teacher was so boring, but I was always off in
Yeah,
another
yeah.
world. I wasn't paying
Oh my
attention to
god.
that guy. But
All right,
yeah,
Troy. I really appreciate
funny
this.
stuff.
We have a great thing going. Everybody look forward to True Pulp. It'll be out. When are we looking? Like August?
So the Kickstarter will kick off
June
June
3rd.
3rd. It'll go for
Yeah.
45 days. So you have 45 days to back the Kickstarter. Obviously, the higher you back it, the more things we can offer for readers and stuff like that. And we can drop the link in the in the you have that link. You can drop that link in the description of this video or comments or whatever. So yeah, you guys can find that link. You'll have 45 days to back it, and then obviously books and stuff will start coming out in August, September, October, time frame, once we're done with the Kickstarter. And then that they won't hit mass market until really the beginning of next year. All the Kickstarter backers will have them for 90 days ahead of time. And also the cover that we're going to have for Kickstarter is only a Kickstarter cover.
Right.
If you order it from Kickstarter, you get that cover.
Very cool.
If you don't, you're going to get a different cover. It'll still be a good cover, but you're going to get a different cover for the book if you're outside of that Kickstarter.
Very
window.
cool. I'm really looking forward to this. And we're going to try to do 2 of these a year.
Yeah.
Like I said, the True series, this one's True Pulp. So, we'll see how it goes.
We'll do a little bit of True everything. If this one's successful the way we want it to be, then we'll do some more of these. One of the things we're going to try to do, there's going to be some really limited edition hardcovers that are signed by every author, which means we have to send these books around the world.
But we're going to try.
So those are going to be very expensive, because obviously we're going to have to ship them all over the place and then ship them to you. So those are going to be very expensive, but it will be a collector's edition that is like no other, because some of these authors, like, you will not see. The big beauty of this type of a thing is you won't see all these authors necessarily in the same volume again, and you certainly won't get signatures from all of them on the same thing. Something that's pretty tough to handle. But there's a reader event in Vegas in November. A couple of us will already be there. Maybe we'll invite a couple more, and we'll sign some books for you there. Hey, you never know, guys. Depends on how that Kickstarter goes.
This is going to be, I mean, whether we like it or not, Troy and I are starting an industry.
Exactly.
It's actually starting to own us a little bit.
Exactly.
But it's a very exciting endeavor, and I'm having a blast with it. All right, Troy, thanks so much, brother.
You betcha, my man. Have a wonderful evening. See you next time, everybody.
Take care, everybody, and ciao, ciao.